The coffee spilled in slow motion. I watched the dark liquid crawl across the wood grain. The same pine table I'd planed and sanded with these hands 53 years ago. My fingers were shaking again, not from fear, not from weakness, from 7 decades of gripping hammers, lifting beams, laying brick after brick under the Georgia sun until my palms bled and calloused over, then bled again. My son Marcus laughed first, not a chuckle, not a polite cough to cover embarrassment. A full, sharp laugh that cut through the Sunday dinner chatter like a nail through soft pine. Then my grandson Jordan, 28 years old, 6-figure salary, couldn't change a tire to save his life. He didn't even look up from his phone, just shook his head. That subtle gesture that says, "Here we go again," without speaking a word. The coffee pooled near my daughter Elaine's plate. She grabbed a napkin with the efficiency of a woman who'd spent 30 years cleaning up other people's messes. "Dad, maybe you should use the mug with the handle," she said, her voice clinical, detached, the same tone she probably used to tell patients they needed to start thinking about assisted living. I felt Clara's hand on my forearm, my wife of 56 years. Her touch was warm, steady, the same hands that had bandaged my cuts, packed my lunches at 4 a.m., held our babies while I worked doubles to keep the lights on. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her fingers tightened just enough to say, "I see you. I'm here." But nobody else saw me. They saw a trembling old man who couldn't hold a cup, an inconvenience. A relic taking up space in a house they'd already started discussing in whispers. When's he gonna sell it? That land's worth something now. Cascade Heights is coming back. They didn't see the 16-hour days. The broken ribs I worked through because we needed the money for Marcus's college applications. The 3 jobs I juggled when Elaine wanted to be a nurse, and the scholarship fell through. They didn't see me on that roof during the ice storm of '82, patching holes while their mother prayed I wouldn't fall. They saw shaking hands. I saw the hands that built everything they'd ever taken for granted. Something shifted in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something older. Something that had been building for years beneath the surface of every missed call, every cancelled visit, every time they talked around me instead of to me. I'd been silent for too long, patient for too long. I'd watched my children forget where they came from, watched my grandson treat this house like a museum of inconvenient history. The coffee kept spreading across the table, and I decided right there, with my family looking everywhere but at me, that it was time they learned exactly whose hands built the ground they stood on. I set the cup down, pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor I'd laid in 1972, and I began to speak. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment and tell me, what city are you watching this from? I want to know where this story is reaching. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's not just my story. It's every grandfather's story, every forgotten builder, every silent sacrifice. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The house smelled like Clara's peach cobbler and my own irrelevance. That's what Sundays had become by the fall of 2023. A ritual performed out of obligation rather than love. Every first Sunday of the month, like clockwork, my children and grandson would pull up in their expensive cars, track across the porch I'd rebuilt 4 times, and sit at my table making small talk about people I'd never meet and problems I couldn't solve. I'd built this tradition 30 years ago when the kids first left home. Mandatory family dinner, no excuses. It was supposed to keep us connected, keep them remembering where they came from. But somewhere along the way, It transformed into something else. A checkbox, a duty. Visit Dad. Check. Clear conscience for another month. Check. The afternoon light came through the western windows at that particular angle that only happens in October. Golden and slanted, catching dust particles that danced like they had nowhere better to be. I'd installed those windows myself in 1974. Special ordered the frames because Clara wanted more light in the dining room. Said it made the room feel hopeful. I'd worked overtime for 3 months to afford them. Now my daughter Elaine sat beneath that western light, scrolling through her tablet between bites of pot roast, probably reviewing patient charts or schedules, or whatever it was that made her too busy to call her father more than twice a month. "Mum, this roast is perfect," she said without looking up. "You have to text me the recipe." Clara smiled that patient smile of hers. The one that had weathered 56 years of marriage, 3 children, 2 miscarriages, and more hard times than I could count. "Sugar, I've texted you that recipe 4 times. You never make it. I will this time. I promise." We both knew she wouldn't. Marcus sat across from her, my baby boy who'd just turned 54 last month. I'd missed his birthday dinner because I'd had a dizzy spell, and Clara didn't want me driving at night anymore. He'd sent me a text, "No worries, Pops, we'll catch up soon." That was 6 weeks ago. He was talking now, loud as always, his voice filling up the room like he was still trying to prove something. So I told the client, I said, "If you want premium brand positioning, you need to invest in premium storytelling." And they wrote a check right there, $40,000. Just like that. Jordan nodded along, his phone face down on the table, but his fingers twitching like an addict waiting for a fix. My grandson wore a watch that probably cost more than I'd made in a year when I was his age. He'd shown it to me once, expected me to be impressed. I'd asked him if it told time any better than the Timex I got when I paid off this house. He'd laughed like I was joking. "Pop's quiet tonight," Marcus said, gesturing at me with his fork. "You feeling okay?" All eyes turned to me, brief, scanning, diagnostic, checking to make sure the old man wasn't about to keel over and ruin dinner. "I'm fine," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. Age had taken the smoothness out of it, left it gravelly and worn. "Just listening." "Well, don't strain yourself," Marcus said with a grin. He meant it as a joke. It landed like a brick. The conversation moved on without me. It always did. Jordan started talking about some campaign he was working on for a sneaker company. It's all about authenticity now, you know? Consumers can smell fake from a mile away. You have to have real stories. Real people. I almost laughed. Almost! Here was my grandson, 28 years old, talking about authenticity while living in a rented loft in Midtown, driving a leased BMW, posting pictures of a life that was 90% performance. He wouldn't know authentic if it laid brick beside him for 12 hours. But I held my tongue. I'd been holding my tongue for years. Clara caught my eye from across the table. She knew, she always knew. Her eyebrows raised just slightly. "You okay?" And I nodded once. She'd been reading me since 1967, since I was a skinny 28-year-old laying foundation for a small house in a neighborhood that was just starting to give black families like ours a chance at something permanent. I met her at a church social. She'd worn a yellow dress that matched the Georgia sun, and when she smiled at me, I knew I'd found the only thing in my life I'd never have to build. It was already perfect. We got married 4 months later in that same church. I'd worked 3 jobs to afford the ring. It wasn't much, a small diamond, thin gold band. But when I slipped it on her finger, she cried like I'd given her the world. Maybe I had. Maybe that was the last time anyone in my family looked at something I'd done with that kind of pure gratitude. Robert, you want more green beans? Clara asked, pulling me back to the present. I'm good, baby. Elaine looked up from her tablet. Dad, you're barely eating. Are you sure you feel okay? There it was again. That clinical concern. The nurse assessment. She wasn't asking because she wanted to know how I felt. She was asking because she was trained to identify problems before they became emergencies. I said I'm fine. The sharpness in my tone made her blink. Marcus and Jordan exchanged glances. Clara's hand moved to her water glass. A nervous gesture I recognized. Okay, Elaine said slowly. I'm just checking. Silence settled over the table like dust. The kind of silence that happens when you've said something true but unwelcome. When you've disrupted the carefully maintained fiction that everything is fine, we're all fine, this is all fine. I reached for my coffee cup. It was sitting in the same spot where I'd set it 20 minutes ago, right beside my plate. The cup was white ceramic with a chip on the rim from when Jordan dropped it as a kid. Clara had wanted to throw it out, but I'd kept it. Waste not, want not. That's how I was raised. My hand moved toward it, steady at first. But halfway there, the tremor started. It had been getting worse over the past year. The doctor said it was essential tremor. Common in old age, nothing to worry about. But I worried. Not about the medical part. I'd lived 84 years. My body was entitled to fall apart. I worried about what it represented. Proof that I was fading. Evidence that the strong hands that had built houses, raised children, and held together a family were becoming unreliable. My fingers closed around the cup. The tremor intensified. I'd learned to compensate for it, to use both hands, to move slowly. But I was tired. Tired of compensating. Tired of being careful. Tired of treating my own body like something fragile. I lifted the cup. The coffee began its slow, inevitable arc toward disaster. And in that moment, before the liquid hit the wood, before the laughter and the shame and the breaking point, I saw my whole life in that trembling cup. Every sacrifice reduced to a punchline. Every callous and scar and sleepless night dismissed as ancient history. Every brick I'd laid, every nail I'd driven, every drop of sweat and blood I'd given, all of it rendered meaningless by time and ingratitude. The coffee spilled, and everything changed. The coffee hit the table with a sound that shouldn't have been loud, but somehow filled the entire room. It wasn't a splash. It was more like a sigh, liquid surrendering to gravity, spreading across the pine in dark fingers that reached toward my daughter's plate. My son's folded napkin, the centerpiece Clara had arranged that morning with fresh flowers from the garden I'd helped her plant in 1985. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Marcus laughed. It started as a snort, the kind of sound you make when you're trying not to laugh, but can't help it. Then it grew into a full chuckle, his shoulders shaking, his hand coming up to cover his mouth, like that would somehow make it better. Like hiding the laughter made it less real. Jesus, Pop, he said through his fingers. Every time, not every time, 3 times in the last year. 3 times I'd lost control of a cup, a glass, a fork. 3 times my body had betrayed me in front of my family. But to Marcus, it was every time, like I'd become a walking disaster, a liability, a comedy show he had to endure once a month. Jordan didn't laugh out loud. He was too polished for that, too aware of social graces in that performative way young people are these days. But I saw it. The flicker of a smirk, the quick glance at his phone, like he couldn't wait to text someone about his grandfather's latest mishap. His fingers actually moved toward the device before Elaine shot him a look that froze him mid-reach. My daughter was already in motion, napkins in hand, dabbing at the spreading stain with practiced efficiency. "It's okay, Dad," she said in that soothing voice I'd heard her use on confused patients in the hospital parking lot. "No big deal. Happens to everyone." But it didn't happen to everyone. It happened to me, Robert Pop Harris, who once carried 200-pound beams up scaffolding in 100-degree heat, who'd built 17 houses with a crew of 3 men over the course of 1978 alone, who could hammer a nail straight in one hit from the time I was 12 years old. Now I couldn't hold a coffee cup. "Maybe we should get you one of those cups," Jordan said. He'd found his voice, apparently. "You know, with the big handles. And the lid? They make them for—" He stopped himself, but the word hung in the air anyway. "Elderly, invalid, children." Clara's hand found mine under the table. Her fingers threaded through my trembling ones, steadying them, hiding them. She'd been doing that more and more lately, creating small shields between me and the world's judgment, between me and my own family's pity. "The cup is fine," Clara said quietly. Her voice had steel in it, the kind I'd heard maybe a dozen times in 56 years. Usually when someone at church said something ignorant, or when a store clerk followed us around like we were thieves, that steel came out when someone she loved was being disrespected, and it could cut through anything. But Marcus missed it entirely. "Mom, I'm just saying, there are adaptive products now. No shame in it. Everyone gets old. Everyone gets old." Like that explained everything. Like aging was permission to forget who I'd been, what I'd done, what these hands had accomplished before they started betraying me. Elaine finished sopping up the coffee. The stain remained darker than the rest of the wood, a shadow that would probably never come out completely. She bundled the wet napkins and stood, moving toward the kitchen with her tablet tucked under one arm. "I'll get fresh napkins," she said, "and maybe some water, Dad. Coffee might be too hot anyway." Too hot, like I was a child who needed his beverages temperature checked. I pulled my hand from Clara's grip, not roughly, but firmly. I needed to feel the tremor, needed to own it instead of hiding from it. These were my hands. Shaking or not, they were mine. "I don't want water," I said. The words came out harder than I intended. Marcus's smile faded. Jordan finally put his phone in his pocket, sensing something shifting in the room. Elaine stopped halfway to the kitchen, turning back with that concerned crease between her eyebrows. "Dad!" "I want my coffee. In my cup. The one I was drinking from." Silence. The kind that's heavy with unspoken things, with the weight of words people want to say but don't. Clara was watching me now, her expression unreadable. She knew this mood, had seen it maybe 3 or 4 times in our entire marriage. The last time was in 1989, when Marcus got arrested for joyriding in a friend's car and came home with an attitude instead of an apology. I'd sat him down at this same table and explained in no uncertain terms the difference between being a man and being a fool. He'd needed that talk then. They all needed a different version of it now. "Pop, come on," Marcus said, his voice taking on that placating tone. "Nobody's trying to disrespect you. We're just concerned." "Concerned," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "That's what we're calling it now? What else would we call it?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. At 54, he was starting to show his age around the eyes, in the grey creeping through his temples that he tried to hide with expensive haircuts. He wore a watch that cost more than my first car. His shirt probably cost what I used to make in a week. He'd built a good life for himself, and I was proud of that, truly. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that good lives aren't built on thin air. They're built on foundations, and I'd laid his foundation brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, sacrifice by sacrifice. You laughed, I said simply. Marcus blinked. What? When I spilled the coffee? You laughed. He shook his head, defensive now. Pop, it wasn't like that. It was just, nervous laughter. I wasn't laughing at you. Then what were you laughing at? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know. The situation? It was just a reflex, I said. Like when something's funny. Dad, you're making this into something it's not. Elaine interjected. She'd moved back to the table, positioning herself like a mediator. Always the problem solver. Always trying to smooth things over before they got messy. We all love you. Nobody's disrespecting you. Marcus didn't mean anything by it. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He didn't mean anything by it. The disrespect was casual, reflexive, so normalized that he didn't even recognize it. You could laugh at your father's failing body because everyone gets old. You could talk around him, make decisions about his life without consulting him, treat his opinions like relics because he doesn't understand the modern world. Jordan cleared his throat. Pup, maybe we should just drop it. Finish dinner. I looked at my grandson, 28 years old, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly Social Security check, living in a world I'd helped build, but where I no longer seemed to belong. He'd been raised with everything I'd never had. Opportunity, education, connections. I'd worked my whole life so my children could give their children a better start. And somehow, that better start had erased the memory of where it all began. You want to drop it? I said to Jordan. It wasn't a question. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. I just mean, yeah, let's just eat and have a good time. That's why we're here, right? Why are you here, Jordan? The question hung in the air. He looked confused, like I'd asked him to solve a calculus equation. What do you mean? It's Sunday dinner. We come every month. That's not what I asked. I asked why you're here, not what day it is, not what the schedule says. Why? He glanced at his father, looking for help. Marcus jumped in. Pop, what's this about? You feeling okay? You seem upset. I almost laughed at that. You seem upset. Like my emotions were the problem. Like if I just calmed down, swallowed my feelings, let it go one more time, everything would go back to the comfortable fiction we'd all been living. But I was tired of swallowing feelings, tired of being the strong, silent foundation everyone stood on without noticing, tired of watching my family treat me like a relic in my own house. Clara's voice cut through the tension, soft but firm. Robert, I turned to her. She wasn't asking me to stop. She was asking me if I was sure. This was a line we couldn't uncross once I stepped over it. 56 years of marriage had taught us to communicate in glances, in tones, in the space between words. I gave her a small nod. I'm sure she nodded back. Then say what needs saying. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor, the hardwood floor I'd laid in 1972 with my own hands, board by board, because we couldn't afford to hire anyone, and Clara wanted real wood instead of linoleum. My knees protested, my back ached, but I stood, planted my feet, felt the solid ground beneath me that I'd built with sweat and splinters and determination. The room went absolutely silent. Even the old clock on the wall, the one I'd fixed 17 times over the years, because Clara loved it and refused to throw it away, seemed to hold its breath. I placed both hands on the table, my treacherous, trembling hands, the hands that had betrayed me moments ago, the hands that had become a source of shame. But they were still my hands, and it was time my family remembered what these hands had built. Standing felt like an act of defiance, not against my family, not yet, Against gravity, against time, against the 84 years that pressed down on my shoulders like all the beams and bricks and bags of concrete I'd carried in my lifetime, accumulated into one crushing weight that never quite left. But I stood anyway, because some things are worth the effort. Some things demand you rise, even when rising hurts. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I'd heard in years, louder than construction sites at full roar, louder than the thunderstorm that nearly took off our roof in '93. It was the silence of people suddenly aware that something important was about to happen, something that couldn't be interrupted or dismissed or smoothed over with polite deflection. My hands were still on the table, palms down, fingers spread. The tremor was visible. I wasn't hiding it anymore. Let them see. Let them see what time does to the hands that built their world. Pop? Marcus said carefully. He'd gone still, his fork halfway to his mouth, frozen like a photograph. You okay? You need to sit down? I've been sitting down for 20 years, I said. My voice came out steady, stronger than I'd expected. Sitting down, staying quiet, watching. Elaine set her tablet face down on the table. The first time all evening she'd fully disconnected from it. Her nurse instincts were probably screaming at her. Elevated blood pressure, potential cardiac event, assess the patient. But something in my posture, my tone, made her hold back. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked. Genuine concern now, not clinical assessment. Maybe the first time in months she'd asked me something and actually wanted the real answer. "What's wrong?" Where did I even begin? "You wiped up the coffee," I said, looking at the dark stain still visible on the wood despite her efforts. "But you didn't ask about the table," she blinked, confused. "The table? This table? The one you're sitting at? The one that's been here longer than you've been alive? Did you ever wonder about it? It's a nice table, Dad. Mum always keeps it polished. I made it," I said. "Summer of 1970. Cut and planed every piece of pine myself. Your mother was pregnant with you, and she'd seen a picture in a magazine. One of those fancy dining tables that cost more than I made in 3 months. She didn't ask for it, just mentioned it once, said it looked nice. So I built it." I ran my hand across the surface, feeling the grain beneath my palm, remembering how the wood had felt rough under my fingers before I'd sanded it smooth, remembering the splinters, the measurements I'd checked and rechecked, the nights I'd spent in the garage after 12-hour shifts because I wanted it done before Elaine was born. Took me 6 weeks of nights. Had to borrow tools I didn't own. Watched a carpenter at a job site to learn how to do the joints properly. Your mother cried when I brought it in. Said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Clara's eyes were glistening now. She remembered. Of course she remembered. That table was one of the first things I'd built for us that wasn't purely practical, that was about beauty and love instead of just survival. "I didn't know that," Elaine said softly. "No," I said. "You didn't? None of you know. And that's not entirely your fault. I never told you. But you never asked either." Jordan shifted in his seat. "Pop, we appreciate everything you've done." "Do you?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. "Do you appreciate it, Jordan? Tell me what you appreciate, specifically." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his father for help. "That you know, worked hard, provided for the family, built this house, I repeated. "That's what you think? That I just built a house?" The words were starting to come faster now, bubbling up from somewhere deep, from years of swallowing them, pushing them down, telling myself it didn't matter if they understood. But it did matter. It always had. I didn't just build a house, son. I built a possibility. You understand that? In 1971, a black man buying land in Cascade Heights. That was a statement. That was a risk. There were neighborhoods I couldn't live in. Banks that wouldn't loan to me. White contractors who wouldn't work with me. Your grandmother told me I was dreaming too big. Told me to find a rental and be grateful. I could see her face in my memory. My mother, worn down by decades of being told to shrink herself, to be satisfied with less. She'd loved me, but she'd been afraid for me, afraid I'd reach too high and fall too hard. But I bought this land anyway, 1/4 acre, paid cash because no bank would touch me, and I built this house with my own hands. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. You think contractors were lining up to build houses for black families back then? You think we had options? Marcus set down his fork. His expression had changed from defensive to something else. Maybe the beginning of understanding, maybe just discomfort. Pup, we know things were different back then. Different, I said. That's a polite word for it. Different. Like it was just a matter of preference. Like choosing vanilla over chocolate. You want to know what different looked like? I didn't wait for an answer. Different looked like me framing walls in 100-degree heat with no help, because the white workers on the job site wouldn't share their water cooler. Different looked like me working 16-hour days. Sunrise to sunset at the construction site, then coming home and working by floodlight to build our house. Because I couldn't afford to hire anyone, and we needed a roof before winter. The memories were coming faster now, sharper. I could smell the sawdust, feel the splinters embedding in my palms, taste the exhaustion that went bone deep. Different looked like your mother, 8 months pregnant with you, Elaine, holding the other end of a 2x4 because we had nobody else. Different looked like me mixing concrete in a wheelbarrow at midnight, because that was the only time I had. Different looked like bleeding through work gloves and not stopping because stopping meant we'd sleep in our car for another month. Elaine's hand had gone to her mouth. Clara was crying silently, tears running down her cheeks, but she was smiling too. That bittersweet smile of someone remembering hard times that somehow also held beauty. Every brick in this foundation, I laid it. Every wall, I framed it. Every pipe, every wire, every nail, my hands. These shaking, useless hands that you laugh at. Pop, I said, I didn't mean, Marcus started. You laughed because you've forgotten, I cut him off. You've forgotten what these hands did, what they built. Not just this house. I built you a foundation. I built you opportunities I never had. I worked 3 jobs so you could go to college, Marcus. 3 jobs. I roofed houses, laid brick, and worked nights at the warehouse. You remember that warehouse? He nodded slowly. Yeah, you'd come home smelling like cardboard and diesel. I worked there for 11 years. 11 years of lifting boxes, loading trucks, breathing in fumes that probably took years off my life. You know why? For us, he said quietly. For you. So you could study instead of work. So you could chase your dreams instead of just survival. I carried boxes until my back gave out, literally gave out. Hospitalized me for a week in 1985. So you could sit in a college classroom and learn about marketing and brand, positioning and all those fancy words that mean convincing people to buy things they don't need. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I wasn't angry at Marcus for his success. I was proud of it. But somewhere in his journey from my son to a successful businessman, he'd forgotten the bridge he'd walked across. The bridge I'd built with my body, my time, my sacrifice. And you, Elaine, I turned to my daughter. You think I don't know what nursing school cost? You think I don't remember taking on extra jobs, selling the truck I loved, that blue Chevy I'd saved for 3 years to buy, so we could make your tuition? Her face had gone pale. Daddy, You never asked what happened to that truck. Just came home one day and it was gone. And you were so worried about your exams, you didn't even notice. That's not a criticism, baby. That's what I wanted. For you to focus on your future, not worry about money. But now you sit at my table, on chairs I made, under a roof I built, and you treat me like I'm senile when my hands shake from the work I did to give you that future. The words were pouring out now, unstoppable. 50 years of unspoken sacrifice, of swallowed frustration, of being taken for granted by the people I'd given everything for. You want to know why my hands shake? I held them up, spreading my fingers so they could see the tremor clearly. These hands have mixed enough concrete to build a dozen houses, have carried enough lumber to build a small city, have driven more nails than you've sent text messages, Jordan. They shake because I wore them out. I used them up. I spent them like currency to buy you all the comfortable lives you're living. Pop. Jordan's voice was barely a whisper. You asked me earlier if I'm okay, if I feel okay. You want the truth. No, I don't feel okay. I haven't felt okay in years. Not because my body's breaking down. That's just life. That's just aging. I don't feel okay because I'm invisible. I sit at this table once a month and watch you all perform family while forgetting what family means. Clara reached for my hand, but I gently pulled away. Not rejecting her, never her, but I needed to finish this. Needed them to hear all of it. You talk about your jobs, your money, your things. You show me your watches and your cars, and your phones like they're accomplishments. And they are. I'm not diminishing that. But you know what you never talk about. This, us, where you came from. The price that was paid for your comfort. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, I could hear a car pass on the street. The same street I'd watched change over 50 years. From dirt to paved, from segregated to integrated. From forgotten neighborhood to desirable real estate. That coffee I spilled, I said, that wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy is that you saw a shaking old man making a mess. You didn't see the hands that built everything you're touching right now. You didn't see the sacrifices that made your lives possible. You saw inconvenience, a problem to be solved with adaptive cups and water instead of coffee. I sat down slowly, feeling every year in my bones, but I sat straight, shoulders back, because I'd said what needed saying. The foundation had been laid. Now came the hard part, building something on top of it, or watching it all crumble, because the truth was too heavy to bear. The silence that followed was different from before. This one wasn't anticipatory. It was heavy with recognition, with shame, with the weight of years of blindness suddenly lifted. And I waited to see if my family would rise to meet it or turn away from it. Either way, I was done being invisible. The silence stretched so long, I could hear Clara's breathing beside me, shallow and careful, the way she breathed when she was trying not to cry in front of the children. She'd always been the strong one in that way, keeping her emotions private, saving her tears for the bathroom or the bedroom where only I could see them. But I'd made her cry in front of everyone now, made them all uncomfortable with truth instead of comfortable with lies. Marcus was the first to break. His hand went to his face, rubbing his eyes with his thumb and forefinger the way he used to when he was a boy, trying not to cry. I'd seen that gesture 1,000 times, when he fell off his bike and scraped his knee raw, when he didn't make the basketball team in 8th grade, when his first girlfriend broke his heart senior year. Pop, His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. I didn't know. About the truck. About any of it, really. You didn't ask. The words came out flat, factual, not accusatory, though they could have been. Should have been, maybe, but I was too tired for anger. Anger takes energy, and I'd spent mine building things, not destroying them. Elaine's hands were folded on the table, her fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She was staring at the coffee stain, at the dark mark on the wood, and I wondered what she was seeing. The spill, or 50 years of stains and marks and imperfections she'd never noticed, because someone else, her mother, her father, had always been there to clean them up, fix them, make everything look perfect. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then louder, looking up at me with eyes that were Clara's eyes, the same warm brown that had captured my heart in 1967. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. You're right. I've been—" She couldn't finish. The words dissolved into tears, and suddenly my daughter, my strong, capable, nurse-administrator daughter, who handled hospital crises with clinical precision, was crying like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. Part of me wanted to comfort her, tell her it was okay, that I understood, that I wasn't really mad. That's what fathers do, isn't it? We absorb the pain, deflect the guilt, make it easier for our children even when they've hurt us. But I'd been doing that for too long, and sometimes love means letting people sit with their discomfort, letting them feel the weight of their choices, instead of immediately lifting it from their shoulders. Jordan hadn't moved. He sat frozen, his expensive watch catching the afternoon light, his carefully styled hair perfect, his whole appearance screaming success and confidence. But his face looked like a boy who just realized the world was bigger and more complicated than his Instagram feed had led him to believe. I thought, he started, then stopped, swallowed, started again. I thought you were just, I don't know, old, like that's just what old people are. Slow, shaky, kinda out of touch. Out of touch, I repeated, tasting the phrase, because I don't know how to use TikTok, because I don't understand cryptocurrency, because I think a handshake means something and a man's word should be his bond. No, Jordan looked miserable. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? He couldn't answer. Maybe because he'd never really thought about what he meant. That was the problem with his generation. My great-grandchildren's generation would be even worse. Probably everything was surface, aesthetics, performance. They took pictures of their food instead of tasting it, documented their lives instead of living them, and called it authenticity. But looking at Jordan's face now, seeing the shame there, the dawning awareness, maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe every generation thought the next one was too soft, too disconnected. Maybe that's what progress looked like from the perspective of the old. A betrayal of values instead of an evolution of them. "You're not out of touch, Pop," Jordan said quietly. "I am, we all are. We've been so busy. I don't know. Living our lives. We forgot that our lives came from somewhere. From someone." It was the most honest thing I'd heard him say in years, maybe ever. Clara's hand found mine under the table again. This time I let her take it, let her fingers wrap around my shaking ones. She squeezed once, her signal, the one we'd developed over decades of church services and family gatherings and difficult conversations. One squeeze meant I'm here. We're together. Whatever comes next, we face it as one. I squeezed back. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," I said, though that was partially a lie. They should feel guilty. Guilt was appropriate, but it wasn't the end goal. "I'm telling you because I need you to see me, really see me, not as an obligation or a relic or a problem to manage, as a person, as the man who built the platform you're all standing on." Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right. You're absolutely right." He looked around the room, really looked at it for maybe the first time in years. "This house, everything in it. You built all of this? Most of it. What I couldn't build, I paid for with overtime and second jobs. That light fixture?" I pointed to the chandelier above us. Nothing fancy, but Clara had loved it in the hardware store window. Worked double shifts for 3 weeks to afford it. The bay window in the living room. Installed it myself in '79 because your mother wanted to be able to see the sunrise while she drank her coffee. The built-in bookshelves. Elaine asked, her voice still thick with tears. "Summer of 1982. You were 13, obsessed with reading. Complained you had nowhere to keep your books. So I built you shelves." "I remember those shelves," she said slowly. I remember coming home from school one day and they were just there, like magic." "Not magic. Work. 3 weekends of measuring, cutting, sanding, staining. Your mother helped me with the staining part. She had a better eye for the colour. We wanted it to match the trim around the windows." The memories were everywhere in this house. Every corner held a story. Every repair was a chapter. Every improvement was a verse in the long poem of our life together. But nobody read poems anymore. Nobody asked about the stories. The house had become wallpaper, something in the background of their lives, noticed only when something went wrong. "The deck out back," Marcus said suddenly. "The one we used to have barbecues on. You built that too. Summer of '88. You'd just graduated high school. I wanted to do something special, create a space where we could all gather. Took me 2 months because I had to do it after work and I wasn't as young as I used to be. But I finished it before your graduation party." Marcus's eyes had gone distant, remembering. "That party. Half the neighbourhood came. Mom cooked enough food to feed an army." "She did," I said, smiling at the memory. Clara had been in her element that day, moving between the kitchen and the deck, making sure everyone had enough to eat, enough to drink. She'd worn a yellow dress. She always looked beautiful in yellow. And when the sun set and the lightning bugs came out, we danced, just swayed together really, in the corner of the deck while the kids laughed and the music played. "We replaced that deck," Jordan said suddenly. 3 years ago, when it started rotting. I know. You were—" He hesitated. "You were upset about it. I remember. You said we should have asked you first." "I wasn't upset about the deck. Wood rots. Things need replacing. I was upset because nobody told me it was happening. I came over one day and there was a contractor ripping up boards I'd cut and placed with my own hands, taking apart something I'd built without even asking if I wanted to help or say goodbye to it, or my voice caught. Ridiculous getting emotional about a deck. But it wasn't about the wood. It was about being erased. About watching pieces of my life's work disappear without acknowledgement, like they'd never mattered in the first place." "I should have asked," Jordan said. "I should have. I don't know. Done something different. You should have remembered that it wasn't just a deck. It was a piece of me, a piece of our family history. Every board had a memory, but you just saw something old that needed replacing." The afternoon light was changing, getting longer, more golden. In an hour it would be dusk, and this Sunday dinner would be over, and everyone would get in their expensive cars and drive back to their lives. But something had shifted. Whether it would last beyond today, that was the question. "Tell us more," Elaine said suddenly. She'd wiped her face, composed herself. "About the house, about what you built. I want to know. We should know. It was a start. Maybe not enough to repair 50 years of taking things for granted, but it was something. A crack in the wall of indifference." "The stairs," I said, pointing toward the hallway. "Those stairs almost killed me." "What?" Clara spoke for the first time in minutes, surprise in her voice. "You never told me that. Didn't want to worry you. But when I was installing them, you were at your sister's for the weekend, remember? Spring of '73. One of the supports slipped. The whole structure shifted, and I fell. Landed hard, cracked 2 ribs. Robert!" Clara's hand went to her chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have made me stop. Would have made me hire someone. And we couldn't afford someone, baby. You know we couldn't. So I wrapped my ribs and finished the job." "You worked with broken ribs?" Marcus looked horrified. "Cracked, not broken. There's a difference. Though not much of one, really. And yes, because the stairs needed finishing. Because we had a baby on the way. You, Elaine, and I needed those stairs safe before you started crawling. So I worked through the pain." "That's insane," Jordan said. You could have hurt yourself seriously, permanently." "I did hurt myself. My ribs never healed quite right. They ache sometimes, even now. Especially when it rains," I shrugged. "But we had stairs. Safe stairs. That's what mattered." They were all staring at me now, with a look I hadn't seen in years. Not pity, not concern. Something else. Or the beginning of understanding. The realization that the old man at the head of the table wasn't just someone who existed in their present, diminished and fading. I was someone who had built their entire reality, piece by piece, nail by nail, through pain and sacrifice they'd never imagined. "Every room in this house has a story," I continued. "Every repair, every improvement, the insulation in the attic I installed during the hottest summer on record, because our electric bill was killing us. The new pipes I put in when the old ones started leaking. Taught myself plumbing from a library book, because we couldn't afford a plumber. The garden fence that took me 3 weekends because I wanted it sturdy enough to last, and it has. That fence is 40 years old and still standing. 40 years. Elaine repeated softly. 40 years. While you were growing up, going to school, living your lives, I was maintaining it, fixing things, improving things, making sure everything worked so you'd never have to worry, so you could focus on your homework, your friends, your dreams." "We took it all for granted," Marcus said. "Not a question, a statement, an admission." "Yes," I said simply. "You did." The truth sat between us like a living thing. Uncomfortable, undeniable, but necessary. Because the first step toward rebuilding something is admitting it's broken. The light had shifted again, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. This was my favorite time of day, had been for 50 years. That hour when the sun got tired and started its descent, when the heat broke and the air cooled just enough to breathe easier. I'd spent countless evenings on the front porch during this hour, watching the neighborhood change, watching my children grow, watching the world spin forward while I stayed rooted in this one place. "Tell us about the Christmas," Clara said suddenly. I turned to look at her. She was watching me with an expression I knew well, the one that said they need to hear this. "It's time. Which Christmas?" Though I knew which one she meant. 1977. The year hung in the air. Marcus straightened in his chair. "That was the year you got me the bike. The red Schwinn. Yes, I love that bike. Rode it everywhere until I was too big for it." He smiled at the memory. Then the smile faded as something occurred to him. "We didn't have much money that year, did we?" "No," I said. "We didn't. It had been a hard year. A recession had hit. Construction jobs dried up. And I'd spent months scrambling for work. Any work. I'd done roofing in the freezing cold, patched driveways, even cleaned out gutters for elderly neighbors who paid me in cash and homemade meals. Clara had stretched every dollar until it screamed, making one chicken last 3 dinners, buying dented cans at the discount store, sewing patches on clothes until there was more patch than original fabric. "You were 9 years old," I said to Marcus. "You'd seen that bike in the Western Auto Store window. Red with white trim, chrome handlebars, banana seat. You looked at it every time we drove past. I remember," Marcus said softly. "I used to dream about it. You never asked for it. That's what killed me. You were a good kid. You knew things were tight. You'd see other kids with new bikes, new toys, and you never complained, never asked for anything. But I'd see you looking at that bike, and I knew you wanted it more than anything." Elaine was leaning forward now, invested. "How much did it cost?" $79.95. Might as well have been $700. We barely had money for groceries, let alone a bike. "But you got it for him anyway," Jordan said. "I did." The memory was still sharp, still painful in its own way. I picked up every extra job I could find from October through December. Worked 7 days a week, sometimes 20 hours a day. Your mother hardly saw me. You kids hardly saw me. I was either working or sleeping, nothing in between. Clara's hand tightened around mine. She remembered those months. Remembered me coming home after midnight, falling into bed fully clothed, waking at dawn to do it again. Remembered the worry lines that appeared on her face. The fear that I'd work myself to death chasing an impossible goal. 2 weeks before Christmas, I still didn't have enough. I continued. I'd saved $63. Close, but not close enough. The store wouldn't hold it, and I knew if I waited, someone else would buy it. "What did you do?" Marcus asked. I looked at him. My son, 54 years old, successful businessman, probably spent more on lunch meetings in a week than I'd earned in a month back then. He needed to hear this. They all did. I sold my tools. The words landed heavy. Clara made a small sound. She'd known, of course, but hearing me say it out loud after all these years still hurt her. "Your tools?" Elaine said. "Dad, those were everything to you. How could you work without tools?" Exactly what your mother said. We had a fight about it, one of the few real fights we've ever had. She told me I was being foolish, that I needed those tools to make a living, that a bike wasn't worth my livelihood. She was right, Marcus said quietly. She was, but you were 9 years old and it was Christmas, and you'd been so good, so patient, never asking for anything. And I thought, my voice caught, even now, 47 years later, the emotion was fresh. I thought maybe if I could give you this one thing, this one dream, it would make up for all the times I wasn't there, all the school plays I missed because I was working, all the bedtime stories I couldn't read because I came home after you were asleep. The room had gone completely silent except for the clock, ticking and Clara's quiet, crying. I sold my good hammer, the one my father gave me. When I started in construction, my level, my saw, my drill, kept only the bare minimum I absolutely needed. Took them to a pawn shop on Memorial Drive, got $23 for tools worth 10 times that. But it was enough. "Oh, Pop," Marcus's voice was thick. "Christmas morning, you came running out and saw that bike under the tree. We didn't have many presents that year, just the bike and some small things for the girls, and your face." I smiled at the memory despite the pain. Your face lit up like the sun. You threw your arms around me, said, "Thank you, Daddy, thank you, thank you, thank you." And in that moment, it was worth it. Worth every tool, every sacrifice, everything. "How did you get your tools back?" Jordan asked. "I didn't. Not those tools." I borrowed equipment from other guys on job sites for months, saved up slowly, bought cheaper replacements over the next year. Never got tools that good again. My father's hammer. That hammer had built half the houses in our old neighborhood. gone to someone who probably didn't know its value, didn't know its history. Marcus had his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. My successful son crying at my table. "You never told me," he said through his hands. "All these years, you never said anything." What was there to say? You were a child. It was my job to provide, to sacrifice. That's what fathers do. No, Marcus lifted his head, his face wet with tears. That's what you did. That's what you always did. But I should have known. Someone should have told me. Because you know what I did with that bike. I remembered. How could I forget? 6 months later, I left it outside overnight. Someone stole it, and I cried for a day. And then I moved on. Just forgot about it. Forgot about the bike you sold your tools to buy me. You were 9 years old, son. Kids forget. Kids move on. That's how it should be. But I'm not 9 anymore, and I'm just now understanding what you gave up, what you've always given up. He looked around the table at his sister, his son. We've all just taken and taken and taken, haven't we? And never once stopped to ask what it cost you. Elaine was crying openly now, too. Daddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't want apologies, I said. I want you to understand, to see. Because it wasn't just that Christmas. It was every Christmas, every birthday, every school expense, every doctor visit. Your mother and I went without new clothes, without vacations, without so many things, so you could have what you needed. Tell them about my nursing school, Elaine said to Clara. Tell them what you did. Clara wiped her eyes. Robert, we don't need to. Yes, we do, Elaine insisted. They need to hear it. I need them to hear it. Clara looked at me. I nodded. She took a breath. When Elaine got accepted to nursing school, we didn't have the money for tuition. We'd saved what we could, but it wasn't enough. The scholarship she applied for fell through. We had 2 months before school started and a $5,000 gap. $5,000 in 1985, I added. That was a fortune to us. Your father took a third job, Clara continued, working nights at the hospital loading dock, midnight to 8 a.m. Then he'd come home, sleep 3 hours, and go to his regular construction job. I started cleaning houses, 5 houses a week, sometimes 6. We both worked ourselves half to death. Mom, Elaine's voice broke. I knew things were tight, but I didn't know. We didn't want you to know, Clara said firmly. We wanted you to focus on your studies, not worry about money. That's what parents do. We carry the weight so our children can fly. But I could have worked, Elaine said. I could have taken a year off, saved money, and waste your acceptance? Waste your chance? I shook my head. No, you were going to nursing school. That was non-negotiable. You'd worked too hard, dreamed too long. We'd figure out the money. And we did. You figured it out by destroying your bodies, Marcus said. Pop, you said your back gave out in 85. That was from the third job, wasn't it? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. It was, he answered himself. You worked yourself into the hospital so Elaine could go to school. And it was worth it, I said firmly. Look at you. Look at what you became. A nurse, a supervisor, a leader. You've helped thousands of people, saved lives, made a difference. That's worth a herniated disc and a week in the hospital. But it shouldn't have cost that, Elaine said. It shouldn't have cost you your health, your tools, your everything. That's what love costs, Clara said quietly. Everything. You give everything because your children are worth everything. And you do it without keeping score, without expecting recognition, because that's what it means to be a parent. But we should recognize it, Jordan said. He'd been quiet, listening, and now his voice was raw. We should know these stories. Pop, you said every room has a story. But it's more than that. Your whole life is a story we never bothered to read. He was right. My whole life was a story written in brick and mortar, in sweat and sacrifice, in choices made and prices paid. But it was written in a language they'd never learned to read, in a dialect of duty and devotion that modern life had made obsolete. "There are so many stories," I said, "so many things you don't know. The time I worked through pneumonia, because we couldn't afford for me to miss work. The time your mother and I skipped meals for a week so we could afford Marcus's class trip. The time we refinanced the house I'd built with my own hands, to pay for emergency surgery for Elaine when she was 16, and the insurance wouldn't cover it all." "I remember being sick," Elaine said slowly. "My appendix. But I thought insurance covered it. Covered most of it. Left us with $8,000 in bills. We refinanced, stretched the mortgage out another 10 years. I was 53 years old, adding a decade to my house payments, meaning I'd be 63 before I owned my house free and clear again. You did own it free and clear," Marcus said. "I remember the party when you made the last payment. That was, 2000? 1998. I was 66 years old. Should have paid it off at 56. But your sister needed emergency surgery, and what was I going to do? Let her die? Let her suffer? The house could wait. Your mother could wait. I could wait. My children couldn't." The golden light was fading now, giving way to the purple blue of early evening. Soon it would be dark. Soon this dinner would be over. But something had changed in this room. Something fundamental. The veil had been lifted. The stories had been told. The invisible labor of love had been made visible. "I don't know how to make this right," Marcus said. "I don't know how to give back what you gave us." "You can't," I said simply. "That's not how it works. You can't repay your parents. You can only pay it forward. But you can see us. You can know us. You can stop treating us like relics, and remember we're people who loved you enough to give everything." "We will," Elaine said. "I promise, Daddy, we will." Promises were easy. Keeping them was the hard part. But for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, my family was starting to understand. The foundation had been laid. The structure was taking shape. Now we'd see if it could hold. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with recognition, with shame, with the weight of years of blindness suddenly lifted. I could see it in their faces, the way understanding changes a person's expression, makes them smaller somehow, humbler, as they realize how much they didn't know, how much they'd missed while looking right at it. I reached into my shirt pocket. The photograph had been there for 3 days, since I'd pulled it from the old shoebox in the closet. Clara had asked me why I was carrying it around, and I couldn't explain it then. Some part of me knew this moment was coming, knew I'd need proof, not for them, but for myself. Proof that I'd once been strong, capable, young. Proof that these shaking hands had built kingdoms. The photograph was creased and faded. The colours washed out to sepia tones, but you could still see it clearly. A young man, 29 years old, shirtless in the Georgia heat, holding a brick in one hand. Behind him, the skeleton of a house, my house, our house, rising from red Georgia clay. The frame was up, the walls were going up, and I was smiling. God, I was smiling. The smile of a man who believed in tomorrow, who believed that hard work and faith could build anything. I laid the photograph on the table, right over the coffee stain. "That's me," I said. "Summer of 1971. That's the day I laid the first brick on this house." They leaned in, all of them, drawn to this artifact of a past they'd never really considered. A past where their father, their grandfather, had been young and strong and full of dreams. You were so young, Elaine whispered, picking up the photo gently, like it might crumble in her hands. 29. Same age Jordan is now. Near enough. Jordan looked at the photograph, then at me, then back at the photograph. I could see him trying to reconcile the two images. The powerful young man in the picture with the trembling old man at the table. They seemed like different people. They were different people. Time does that. Remakes you cell by cell until you're a stranger to your own youth. How long did it take? Marcus asked. To build the house. 2 years. Well, 2 years before we could move in. But I worked on it for another 5 years after that. Finishing touches, improvements. A house is never really done. It grows with you, changes with you. Every year I'd add something. A closet, a shelf, better insulation. Small things that made it more home and less just structure. 2 years, Marcus repeated. He looked around the room with new eyes, seeing the walls not as walls, but as individual boards, individual nails, individual moments of labor. You built all of this in 2 years while working full-time, while working more than full-time. Construction job during the day, building here evenings and weekends. Your mother helped when she could, but she was pregnant with Elaine, tired all the time. Mostly it was just me and my stubbornness. Clara smiled at that. Stubbornness. That's one word for it. What word would you use? I asked her. Faith, she said simply. You had faith that you could do it. Faith that we'd make it work. Even when I doubted, and I did doubt, Robert. I doubted all the time. You never did. You just kept working. She was right. I'd never let myself doubt, because doubt was a luxury I couldn't afford. Doubt meant quitting, and quitting meant failure, and failure meant my family sleeping in someone else's house, under someone else's roof, living by someone else's rules. I'd grown up that way, renting, moving, never putting down roots because the landlord sold or raised the rent, or just decided he didn't want black tenants anymore. I'd promised myself my children would grow up different, would grow up with permanence, with ownership, with the knowledge that the ground beneath their feet belonged to them and couldn't be taken away. This house wasn't built with money, I said, tapping the photograph. We didn't have money. This house was built with faith, faith that every brick I laid was a brick toward something better. Faith that every nail I drove was a nail holding together a future for my family. And these hands, I held them up again, steady as I could manage despite the tremor. These hands that you laughed at, Marcus. These hands that you want to hide behind adaptive cups and handles, Elaine. These hands built this faith into reality. The photograph sat on the table between us, a bridge between past and present, between who I was and who I'd become. Jordan picked it up, studying it closely. You look happy, he said. Really happy. Not just smiling for the camera. Genuinely happy. I was. Happiest I'd ever been, maybe. I had a wife I loved, a baby on the way, and I was building something real with my own 2 hands. What more could a man want? But you were working yourself to death, Elaine protested. How could you be happy doing that? Because the work had meaning. That's the difference between labor and drudgery, meaning. When you're building something for people you love, when you can see the purpose in every drop of sweat, it doesn't feel like suffering. It feels like prayer, Clara nodded. He used to say that. Work is prayer. I didn't understand it at first. Seemed like justification for never resting. But I came to see it. The way he approached his work, the care he took, the pride. It was spiritual for him. It was, I confirmed. Every house I ever worked on, I worked like I was building it for God himself, because shoddy work is disrespectful. To yourself, to the people who'll live there, to the gift of being able to create something. My father taught me that. His father taught him. It's a legacy that goes back generations." "Tell them about your father," Clara said softly. I hesitated. My father was complicated territory. Love and pain mixed together so thoroughly you couldn't separate them. But maybe that's what they needed to hear. That sacrifice and suffering weren't unique to me. That I'd inherited this ethic of hard work and silent endurance from generations who'd had even less than I did. "My father was a sharecropper," I began. "Worked land he'd never owned for a white man who paid him in scraps. He was gone before sunrise, home after dark, every day of his life. Worked himself into an early grave, died at 52 from a heart that just gave out." 52, Jordan said. "That's so young. Young by today's standards. Not so young back then. Not for a black man working the fields in rural Georgia. The work killed you early. Everyone knew it. But what choice did you have? You worked or you starved." I could still see my father's hands in my memory. Huge, calloused, scarred from decades of labour. Hands that could be gentle. Tying my shoes when I was small. Ruffling my hair. Teaching me to hammer straight. But that mostly knew hardness. The last thing he said to me, I was 18 years old, about to leave home and try to make it in Atlanta. He pulled me aside, put those big hands on my shoulders and said, "Boy, you make sure you build something that can't be taken away. Don't work another man's land. Don't live in another man's house. Build your own." And then he gave me his hammer, the one I later sold for Marcus's bike, and said, "This hammer built a lot of nothing for me. Make sure it builds something for you." The emotion caught in my throat. I'd told this story to myself 1,000 times over the years, but never out loud, never to my children. It felt too raw, too personal, but they needed to hear it, needed to understand that my sacrifices weren't just about them. They were about generations, about breaking cycles, about building what my father never could. "That's why this house matters so much," I continued. "It's not just wood and brick. It's the fulfillment of my father's dying wish. It's proof that his suffering wasn't meaningless, that his son did better, built better. When I drive that last nail, when I laid that last brick, I was keeping a promise to a dead man. I was honoring him." "And we've dishonored it," Marcus said quietly, "by not knowing, by not caring, by treating it like just another house. You didn't know to care. That's on me. I didn't tell you these things. Didn't think I needed to. Thought the work spoke for itself. But work is silent. Stories have to be told." Elaine was holding the photograph now, tears dripping onto the faded paper. "You're right. You're absolutely right. We should have asked. Should have wanted to know. But you also should have told us, Daddy. You should have made us understand." She was right, too. This failure was shared. I'd been too proud, too silent, too committed to the myth of the strong stoic father who carries everything without complaint. And they'd been too comfortable, too absorbed in their own lives, too modern in their assumption that the present was all that mattered. "I'm telling you now," I said. "I'm telling you that this house, every board, every nail, every pane of glass, represents faith. Faith that tomorrow could be better. Faith that hard work mattered. Faith that building something solid and permanent was worth the sacrifice." "We believe you," Jordan said. "Pop, we believe you. We see it now. But seeing wasn't enough. Understanding wasn't enough. What I needed, what every forgotten builder, every silent sacrifice, every invisible parent needed, was for the seeing and understanding to change behavior, to change the way they lived, the way they treated others, the way they valued what they'd been given. The question is," I said, looking at each of them in turn, What are you going to do with this faith I've built? This foundation I've laid? Are you going to build on it, or just live on it until it crumbles? The question hung in the air. Outside, the streetlights were coming on. LED now, not the warm sodium glow I remembered, but still marking the transition from day to night, still signalling that time moved forward whether we were ready or not. Clara squeezed my hand again. 3 squeezes this time. Our signal for I love you. I squeezed back 3 times. After 56 years, some conversations needed no words. I want to build on it, Elaine said finally. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to honor this. Honor you. Me too, Marcus added. I've spent my whole adult life building a business, building a brand, but I haven't built anything real. Nothing you can touch. Nothing that'll last. Jordan was quiet, still staring at the photograph. When he finally spoke, his voice was small, younger than his 28 years. I don't know how to build anything, Pop. Not like you did. I make social media campaigns and presentations. I've never even hung a picture frame without calling someone to do it for me. How do I build on a foundation when I don't know how to build? It was the most honest question of the night. Building isn't just about hammers and nails, son. It's about creating something that lasts, something that matters. You want to honor this foundation? Learn to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. Learn to work for meaning, not just money. Learn to see people, really see them, instead of just moving past them. I set the photograph back down on the table, right in the center where everyone could see it. Young Robert Harris holding a brick, building a dream. It seemed like a lifetime ago. It was a lifetime ago. This photograph, I said, is proof that I was here, that I mattered, that I built something. When I'm gone, don't, Clara interrupted. Robert, don't. When I'm gone, I continued gently, this house will still be here. These walls, this floor, this table, and I need you to remember that they didn't just appear. They were built by hands that are now shaking and weak, but were once strong enough to carry your whole world. The tears were flowing freely now, from Elaine, from Marcus, even from Jordan. Clara was crying too, though she tried to hide it, and I felt the weight lifting, just a little. The weight of being unseen, unvalued, forgotten. They saw me now. Finally they saw me. The question was, would they remember? Jordan stood up so suddenly, his chair scraped loud against the floor I'd laid board by board 40 years ago. For a moment I thought he was leaving, thought maybe the weight of these truths was too much, that he'd retreat back to his phone and his digital world where everything was filtered and nothing hurt this deep. But he didn't leave. He walked around the table, his expensive shoes, probably cost more than my first month's rent in 1967, clicking against the hardwood, and he stopped beside my chair. Then, slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something sacred, he reached for my hands, my trembling, useless, shameful hands. He took them both in his, held them gently, and for the first time since he was a small boy, he really looked at them, not past them, not around them, at them. Pop, his voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. I could feel the tremor in my fingers, made worse by the emotion coursing through me. But Jordan didn't pull away. He held on tighter, steadying them the way Clara did, the way you hold something precious that might break. These hands, he said, running his thumbs over my knuckles, over the scars and age spots and swollen joints. Pop, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I laughed. I'm so sorry I didn't see. Son, I started, but my voice failed. 50 years of holding it together, of being strong, of never letting them see me break. And now I was breaking. The dam was cracking, and I couldn't stop it. No, Let me say this, please." Jordan was crying now, tears running down his face unchecked. "I've been so blind, so stupid. I thought, God, I don't even know what I thought. That you were just old. That this was just what happened to people. But these hands built everything I've ever known. The house I played in as a kid. The deck where we had my birthday parties. The bookshelf in my room where I kept my trophies. You built that, didn't you?" I nodded. I'd built it when Jordan was 7, after he'd won his first soccer trophy and had nowhere special to put it. Took me a weekend. He'd been so proud, showing all his friends his special shelf. I'd never told him I'd built it, never needed the credit. His joy had been enough. "I remember that shelf," Jordan continued. "I remember loving it, but I never asked where it came from, never thought about it. It was just there, like magic. Like everything in my life has just been there, like magic. And I never once stopped to ask who made the magic happen." Marcus had stood up too. He moved to the other side of my chair, and suddenly both my son and grandson were there, surrounding me. And I felt small in a way that wasn't diminishing, small in the way that comes from being held, from being seen, from mattering. "Pop, I was wrong," Marcus said. His hand came to rest on my shoulder, heavy, warm, real. I was so wrong. I laughed because I was uncomfortable, because seeing you struggle made me confront the fact that you're not invincible anymore, that you're getting old, that someday he couldn't finish, couldn't say the word, death. The reality that hung over every family gathering once parents reached a certain age. The unspoken truth that these dinners wouldn't last forever, that someday there'd be an empty chair at the head of the table. "I'm 84 years old," I said, finding my voice again. "I've lived a long life, a good life. I'm not afraid of dying, son. I'm afraid of dying without you knowing who I was, what I did, what I gave." "We know now," Elaine said. She'd come around the table too. And suddenly I was surrounded by my children, by my grandson, all of them touching me, hands on my shoulders, on my arms, holding my trembling hands. "Daddy, we know now, and we won't forget. I promise you, we won't forget. Promises are easy," I said, "but without bitterness. Just truth. Keeping them is the hard part." "Then we'll keep it," Marcus said firmly. "We'll keep it by being here, really here, not just going through the motions once a month. We'll keep it by asking questions, by listening, by learning everything we can while we still have you. And we'll keep it by telling these stories," Jordan added, "to my kids someday, to their kids, so they know, so they understand what was sacrificed for them, so your name doesn't just fade away." That hit me harder than anything else. My name, Robert Harris, just a name on a deed, on old tax documents, on a fading gravestone someday. But if they told the stories, if they passed down what these hands had built, what this life had meant, then maybe the name would carry weight, would mean something beyond just a collection of letters. Clara's voice came from behind me, still at her seat, watching this moment unfold. "Tell them about the prayer, Robert. I'd almost forgotten. The prayer. The one I'd prayed every single morning for 50 years, kneeling beside our bed while Clara was still sleeping. The same prayer my father had taught me, that his father had taught him, going back generations to ancestors whose names we'd lost, but whose faith we'd inherited. "Every morning," I said, "before the sun comes up, I kneel beside our bed and I pray. Not for wealth, not for recognition. I pray for strength to build one more day, to provide one more day, to be worthy of the responsibility God gave me when He gave me a family." "Every morning?" Elaine asked. "For 50 years, 56, since the day we got married. It's the first thing I do. The most important thing I do." "I never knew," Marcus said quietly. "I lived in this house for 18 years, and I never knew you prayed every morning." That was the point. Prayer isn't performance. It's between you and God. But I'm telling you now because I want you to understand. Everything I built, everything I gave, it came from faith. Faith that hard work mattered. Faith that sacrifice had meaning. Faith that love was stronger than exhaustion. Jordan's grip on my hands tightened. "Teach me that prayer, Pop. Please, I want to learn it." I looked up at him. My grandson, 28 years old, successful and modern, and so far removed from the world I'd come from. But in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen before. Hunger. Not for things, not for status, but for connection, for roots, for something real to anchor himself to in a world that seemed increasingly unmoored. "It's simple," I said. "Just a few lines. My grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, he couldn't read or write, couldn't afford fancy words. So the prayer is plain, honest. Lord, give me strength to build today. Give me wisdom to build right. Give me love to build for others. And when my hands fail, help me trust that what I've built will stand." That's it. That's the prayer. Jordan repeated it slowly, memorizing each line. Marcus joined in the second time through, then Elaine, and suddenly we were all saying it together. 4 generations of Harris family compressed into this moment, speaking words that had been spoken by men who'd never owned land, who'd worked fields they'd never inherit, who'd died young and forgotten, but who'd left behind this simple prayer, this simple faith. When we finished, the silence was different, not heavy with unsaid things anymore, light, clean, like the air after a storm when everything's been washed and you can breathe deep again. "I've wasted so much time," Marcus said. "So much time being busy, being important, building a career. And I missed this. Missed you? You're here now," I said. "That's what matters. You're here now." "I want to come more," Elaine said. "Not once a month. Every week. Every Sunday. Like it used to be when we were kids. I want to hear all the stories, Daddy. Every single one. While I still can. The unspoken words, while you're still here, hung in the air. But they didn't sting. They were just true. Time was finite. We all knew it. The question was what we did with the time we had left. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that very much." Clara had gotten up, come around the table. She touched Jordan's shoulder, and he stepped back, making room for her. She bent down, wrapped her arms around me from behind, rested her chin on top of my head, the way she'd done 1,000 times over 56 years. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "just for me. Proud of you for speaking up, for telling them. I know it wasn't easy. It hadn't been easy. It had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Harder than building this house in some ways. Because building a house was physical labor. You could see the progress, measure the results. But building bridges between people, especially people who'd grown distant, that was invisible work, uncertain work, work that required vulnerability instead of strength. But looking at my family now, really looking at them, seeing the tears and the understanding and the genuine desire to change, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that the foundation I'd laid wouldn't crumble when I was gone. Hope that the stories would be passed down. Hope that my grandchildren's children would know that once there was a man named Robert Harris who built something with shaking hands and unshakable faith, and that his love was stronger than time. "Thank you," Elaine said, breaking the silence. "Thank you for telling us. Thank you for building all of this. Thank you for everything you've sacrificed. We don't deserve it. You do deserve it, I said firmly. That's what you don't understand. You deserve it because you're my children. Because I love you. Love doesn't need to be deserved. It just is. Then let us love you back, Marcus said. Really love you. Not just show up and eat dinner and leave. Let us know you. Let us help you. Let us be here. I looked at each of them. My daughter with Clara's eyes and my stubborn streak. My son with his father's pride and his mother's heart. My grandson with a future still unwritten, still full of possibility. 3 generations, 3 different worlds, but connected by blood and history, and now, finally, by understanding. Okay, I said. Okay, it was a small word, just 2 syllables, but it carried the weight of surrender, the good kind, the kind where you stop carrying everything alone and let others help bear the load, the kind where you stop being the strong, silent foundation and allow yourself to be seen, to be vulnerable, to be human. The evening had grown dark outside. The golden hour had passed. The purple dusk had faded, and now it was full night. But inside this house built with trembling hands and unshakable faith, the light seemed brighter than it had in years. We stood there together, my family and me, connected by touch and tears and truths finally spoken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like something had been completed. Not ended, completed. Like a house when the last nail is driven and the last board is placed and you step back and see that what you imagined has become real. This was what I'd built for, not just walls and floors and ceilings. This connection, understanding, love made visible through sacrifice, acknowledged and honored. Who's hungry? Clara asked, her practical nature reasserting itself. Dinner's getting cold and we haven't even touched the peach cobbler yet. We all laughed, real laughter this time, not nervous or mocking, but genuine. The kind of laughter that comes from release, from relief, from joy. And we sat back down at the table I'd built in 1970, and we ate dinner together, really together, for the first time in years. The peach cobbler was still warm. Clara had made it that morning, the way she'd made it for 50 years. Her mother's recipe, passed down through generations of women who'd learned to make sweetness from whatever they had. Brown sugar and cinnamon, butter and patience. She served it in the same bowls we'd bought at a yard sale in 1973, chipped and mismatched but ours. But this time, when she handed me my bowl, something was different. Marcus reached over and took the spoon from my hand before I could even try to use it. For a moment I tensed. Here it was again, the assumption of incompetence, the infantilizing help I'd grown to resent. But then he did something I didn't expect. He took a spoonful of cobbler and held it out to me. "Pop," he said softly. "Let me." It wasn't pity in his voice. It wasn't condescension. It was love. Pure, simple love. The kind of love that says, I see you struggling, and I want to help. Not because you're weak, but because I'm strong enough to serve you the way you've served me all these years. I opened my mouth. Let him feed me a bite of peach cobbler. The sweetness exploded on my tongue. Clara's perfect balance of tart and sugar. The crust crispy and buttery. But sweeter than the cobbler was this moment. My son feeding his father. The circle completing itself. The child caring for the parent the way the parent once cared for the child. "Good?" Marcus asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He fed me another bite, then handed the spoon to Jordan. "Your turn," and so it went around the table. Jordan feeding me bites. Elaine, even Clara took a turn, though she'd fed me plenty over the years. In sickness, in exhaustion, in the quiet moments when love was more important than pride. They weren't just feeding me cobbler. They were feeding me dignity, feeding me recognition, feeding me the care I'd spent a lifetime giving them and never expecting in return. When the bowl was empty, Elaine wiped my mouth with a napkin. Gentle, respectful, the way you'd care for someone you honored rather than someone you pitied. "Thank you," I said when I could finally speak. "Thank you." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Thank you for everything. For the house, the sacrifices, the love. For building us a foundation we didn't even know we were standing on." The table was quiet again, but it was a comfortable quiet now, the kind that comes after hard conversations, after tears and truth, when there's nothing left to do but sit together and let the healing begin. Clara broke the silence with a laugh. Her real laugh, the one I'd fallen in love with 56 years ago. "You know what I just realized? We've been sitting at this table for 3 hours, and nobody's checked their phone." Jordan's hand went to his pocket automatically, then stopped. He pulled out his phone, looked at it for a long moment, then did something I'd never seen him do at a family dinner. He turned it completely off, not just silent off. Then he set it face down on the table and pushed it away. "I don't need it," he said. "Everything I need is right here." "Everything we need," Elaine corrected, turning off her own phone. Her tablet had been forgotten somewhere in the chaos of tears and revelations. For the first time all evening, her hands were empty of devices, full of nothing but the moment. Marcus followed suit, powering down his phone with a decisive click. "You know what, Pop? Tell us more. Tell us everything." "We've got time, do we?" I asked, not morbidly, but genuinely. "How long can you all stay?" "As long as you'll have us," Elaine said. "I cleared my whole evening. Nothing's more important than this." "I told the family I'd be home late," Marcus added. "Told them this dinner was important. Didn't know how right I was." Jordan just nodded. "I've got nowhere else to be. Nowhere else I want to be. So I told them stories. Stories I'd kept locked inside for decades. Stories Clara had heard, but that the children never had. I told them about the ice storm of '82, when I'd climbed onto the roof in sub-zero temperatures, because water was leaking into Elaine's bedroom, and I couldn't afford a roofer. How I'd slipped, caught myself on the gutter, hung there for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds before pulling myself back up. How I'd finished the repair with frozen fingers that I couldn't feel for 2 days afterward. I told them about the time Marcus got sick with pneumonia at age 6, and the hospital bills had cleaned us out. How I'd worked 3 months of double shifts, sleeping 4 hours a night to pay them off. How Clara had begged me to slow down, and I'd promised I would. Right after we paid off the bills. How she'd known it was a lie, but had loved me anyway. I told them about Jordan's birth, how I'd been working a job 2 hours away, and had driven like a madman to make it to the hospital in time. How I'd held Jordan for the first time with hands still covered in drywall dust because I hadn't taken time to wash them. How Marcus had cried. Not tears of joy, but tears of gratitude that his son would grow up in a world where his grandfather had already built the foundation for success. I told them about the small things, too. The door frame in the hallway that I'd had to install 3 times because I kept getting the measurements wrong. The time I'd tried to surprise Clara with a new kitchen cabinet and had accidentally installed it upside down. The countless mistakes and failures and learning experiences that nobody saw. Because by the time they noticed, I'd already fixed them. That's what nobody understands about building, I said. Everyone sees the finished product. Nobody sees the mistakes, the do-overs, The nights you lie awake wondering if you're doing it right. Building something real, whether it's a house or a family, is messy. It's imperfect. It's 1,000 small failures that you fix until eventually you've got something that looks like it was easy all along. It wasn't easy, Clara said. Nothing about this life was easy, but it was good. Even in the hard times, maybe especially in the hard times, it was good because we were together. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was paper-thin now, marked with age spots and veins visible beneath the surface. But her grip was still strong, still steady, still the anchor I'd held onto through every storm. 56 years, I said, looking at her. You've put up with me for 56 years. Best 56 years of my life, she said. You built me a house, Robert Harris. But more than that, you built me a life. You built us a family. You built something that'll outlast both of us. Will it? The question came out before I could stop it. The fear I'd carried for years. The one that had driven tonight's outburst. Will it outlast us, Clara, or will it fade? Will they forget? We won't forget, Elaine said fiercely. Daddy, I swear to you, we won't forget. How can we? Marcus added. How can we forget now that we know? Now that we've seen? Jordan stood up again, walked to the window that overlooked the front yard. The yard where I'd planted oak trees in 1975 that were now tall enough to shade the entire house. Trees I'd watered through droughts, staked through storms, protected from disease. Trees that would be here long after I was gone. Pop! He turned back to face me. I want to learn. I want you to teach me how to build, how to fix things, how to work with my hands. I want to know what you know before it's too late. Me too, Marcus said. I've spent my whole life pushing papers and making deals. I want to learn to make something real, something that lasts. And I want the stories, Elaine said. All of them. I want to write them down, make sure they're preserved, make sure my kids and their kids know exactly who Robert Harris was and what he did. This was what I'd wanted. Not gratitude exactly, though that was nice. Not even recognition, though that mattered. What I'd wanted was for them to care, to see value in what I'd built, to understand that the foundation they stood on was worth preserving, worth building on, worth passing down. Okay, I said. Then we'll start next Sunday. Jordan, you come over and I'll teach you how to fix that loose board on the porch. Been meaning to do it myself. But these hands... I held them up, accepting the limitation without shame for the first time. These hands need help now, but they can still teach. They can still guide. And I'll bring my kids, Marcus said. They need to hear these stories too. Need to know their great-grandfather. Really know him. I'll bring my laptop, Elaine added. Start documenting everything. Your story, Mum's story, this house's story. All of it. Plans were being made. Commitments were being spoken. Whether they'd keep them, that remained to be seen. People meant well in moments of emotional clarity, but life had a way of intervening, of returning to old patterns, of letting good intentions fade into the background of busy schedules. But I chose to believe them, chose to have faith, the same faith that had built this house, raised these children, sustained this marriage, faith that people could change, that awareness could lead to action, that love, once truly recognized, could transform behavior. The clock struck 9. Clara started clearing dishes, and for once everyone helped without being asked. They moved around the kitchen, my kitchen, the one I'd designed and built and updated over decades, with new appreciation. I saw Jordan running his hand along the counter, feeling the seam where I joined 2 pieces of laminate in 1987, when we couldn't afford to replace the whole thing. Saw Elaine pausing at the window above the sink, the one I'd enlarged because Clara said the old one didn't let in enough light. Saw Marcus studying the cabinet doors, noticing for the first time that they were slightly mismatched because I'd built them myself over the course of several years, learning and improving with each one. They were seeing the house now, really seeing it, not as a collection of rooms, but as a testament to love. Every imperfection was evidence of effort. Every repair was proof of care. Every upgrade was a gift given in the language of labor. When the kitchen was clean, we moved to the living room. The furniture was old, some of it older than my children, but solid. The couch I'd bought second-hand in 1976 and reupholstered myself when the fabric wore out. The coffee table I'd built from reclaimed wood after a neighbour's oak tree came down in a storm. The bookshelf that held Clara's collection of photo albums, each one documenting our life in chronological order. Elaine pulled out an album, 1985, according to the label on the spine. She opened it and there we were, younger versions of ourselves, frozen in faded photographs. Marcus graduating high school, Elaine in her nursing school uniform, me and Clara at the church picnic, her in a sundress, me in my Sunday best. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings and ordinary Tuesdays that had seemed unremarkable at the time, but now looked precious. "Look how young we were," Clara said, pointing to a picture of us on our 20th anniversary. "You had a full head of hair, Robert." "You had a full head of hair," I corrected. We both laughed. They passed the album around, exclaiming over pictures they'd forgotten, asking questions about people they didn't recognize, listening to Clara and me narrate our history. This was what families did, wasn't it? Told stories, passed down memory, created continuity between past and present and future. But we'd stopped doing it somewhere along the way. Stopped gathering like this. Stopped looking back. Stopped connecting the dots between who we'd been and who we'd become. We'd gotten too busy, too modern, too focused on the next thing to appreciate the things that had already been. Tonight, we'd remembered. Tonight, we'd reconnected. The question was whether it would last beyond this evening, beyond the emotion of the moment, into the ordinary days ahead. Jordan was sitting on the floor now, his back against the couch, looking at a photo of himself as a toddler sitting on my shoulders. "I don't remember this," he said. "You were too," I told him. "We were at the park. You loved being up high, seeing the world from above. You'd laugh and laugh, grab onto my ears to steady yourself. You carried me everywhere," he said slowly, like he was remembering something buried deep. "I remember feeling safe, like nothing could hurt me when I was with you. That's what I wanted, for all of you, to feel safe, to know you were protected. That's what building this house was about, creating safety, creating home." "You did that," Marcus said. "Pop, you did that. We've always felt safe. Maybe too safe. Maybe so safe we forgot that safety isn't free, that someone has to build the walls that keep the danger out." It was the most insightful thing I'd heard him say all night. Safety wasn't neutral. It was constructed, maintained, paid for in sweat and sacrifice and sleepless nights. The children who grew up safe rarely understood the cost of their safety, because that was the point, to shield them, to carry the burden so they didn't have to. But maybe we'd shielded them too much. Maybe they needed to know the cost so they'd understand the value, so they'd be willing to pay it forward when their turn came. The evening wound down slowly. Nobody rushed to leave. Nobody checked the time. We just sat together, talking and remembering, and for the first time in years, really being present. Being family in the truest sense. Not people related by blood, going through the motions of obligation, but people connected by love, by history, by shared understanding of what we meant to each other. Around 11, they finally started gathering their things. Hugs were longer, tighter, meant something more than routine. "I'll see you Sunday," Jordan said, holding my hands again. Not awkwardly this time, but naturally. "We'll fix that porch board together." "Sunday," I confirmed. "And I'll call you Wednesday," Elaine said. "Just to talk. About nothing. About everything. Whatever you want. I'd like that baby. Marcus was last." He stood in front of me, this man who'd once been my little boy. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he pulled me into a hug. The kind of hug you give someone you might lose. The kind that tries to hold on to time, even though time can't be held. "I love you, Pop," he said into my shoulder. "I don't say that enough, but I do. I love you, and I'm going to be better. I promise. I love you too, son. Always have. Always will." When they finally left, Clara and I stood on the porch I'd built in 1972 and had repaired a dozen times since, and watched their taillights disappear down the street. The same street where I'd watched them learn to ride bikes, where I'd taught them to drive, where they'd left for college and careers and lives of their own. "You did good tonight," Clara said, taking my hand. "That was hard, but you did good." "We'll see if it lasts." "It'll last. You planted seeds tonight, Robert. You don't always see the harvest right away, but the seeds were planted. They'll grow." I wanted to believe her, wanted to have faith that tonight was a turning point, and not just an emotional moment that would fade in the harsh light of ordinary days. But faith was what I'd always had. Faith was what had built this house, raised this family, sustained this life. So I chose faith. We went back inside, and I helped Clara finish tidying up. My hands shook as I dried dishes, but I kept going, kept moving, because that's what you do. You keep building, keep maintaining, keep caring for what you've created, even when your hands shake and your body aches, and you're not sure how much time you have left. Before bed, I knelt beside it like I had every morning for 56 years. But tonight I didn't pray my usual prayer. Tonight I prayed something different. "Lord, thank you for this day, for the strength to speak truth, for the grace to be heard, for the gift of family that finally sees me. Help them remember, help them build on what I've built, and help me trust that when I'm gone, the foundation will hold." Clara knelt beside me, something she didn't usually do. She added her own prayer, quieter, private, just for God's ears. When we finished, we climbed into bed, and she curled into my side the way she'd done for decades. "Robert," she said into the darkness. "Yeah, baby?" That was the man I married, the man who speaks up, the man who demands to be seen. I've missed him. He's been here all along. Just got tired. Got quiet. Well, I'm glad he found his voice again. I smiled in the darkness. Me too. Sleep came slowly but peacefully. And when it did, I dreamed of building, of young hands that didn't shake, of a house rising from red Georgia clay, of Clara in a yellow dress, of children laughing in rooms I'd framed with my own hands. I dreamed of legacy, not the kind written in wills or passed down in money, but the kind built brick by brick, story by story, generation by generation. And I dreamed of Sunday, when Jordan would arrive with tools, ready to learn, when the teaching would begin, when the foundation I'd laid would finally be understood, appreciated, and built upon. The house settled around us with its familiar creaks and sighs, the language of aging wood and settling foundation, the language of something built to last. My hands still trembled. They probably always would, but they'd built something that wouldn't tremble, something solid, something real, something that would stand long after the hands that built it had finally, peacefully, been laid to rest. and that was enough.